Good morning, everyone. I would like to formally welcome you to this grocery retail market inquiry public hearing. Let me commence by introducing myself. I'm Halton Cheadle. I'm a Professor Emeritus at the University of Cape Town and chair this panel. My colleague, Ms. Lulama Mtanga, is a competition law expert with extensive experience earned through her former roles at the Competition Commission and as a director of law firm Bowman Gilfillan. We also have Ms. Louise du Plessis from the Competition Commission, who is here in her capacity as the head of the technical team that supports the panel and is the evidence leader in the public hearings. She and a team of lawyers and economists, some of them are sitting in the front row, are assisting the panel in soliciting evidence for the inquiry. I think it's important just to note that this is an inquiry into the grocery retail market. It is, as I've insisted throughout, this is not a court of law. It's not an interrogation. It is simply an attempt for the panel to get evidence in order to make recommendations, which will be contained in a report, which will then be submitted to the minister and thereafter tabled in Parliament for debate. I also want to state that I and my colleague and Ms. du Plessis may ask questions of clarification after you've made your presentation. We don't accept questions or objections or from anyone else. But if you do have objections or you do have questions that you would want that are raised by this particular presentation, you can submit them in writing to the Commission at the address that you can get from Ms. du Plessis or members of the technical team. So that, and then we will process those questions and clarifications through to, in this case, to the SPA group. And with that, then just one additional point. There's going to be a further set of public hearings dealing with the large retail chains, that will take place. A date hasn't been set for it yet, but is expected to take place sometime in September. And with that, may I welcome you to the inquiry, and I wonder if you could introduce yourselves and then make your public submissions.
Good morning. My name is Jean Mayer. I am a partner with the law firm Herbert Smith Freehills. You will hopefully be hearing very little from me today, and we'll be hearing from the SPA representatives. With me is Wayne Hook, who is a director of the SPA Group Limited, Mr. Nizi Nkwelo, who is an independent retailer, and Mr. Dan Maluleka, who is also an independent retailer. I wanted to make just one preliminary remark on behalf of SPA, which is that you will be aware that the question of lease exclusivity is currently the subject of pending proceedings before the Competition Tribunal and is therefore sub judice. And for that reason, although SPA is willing to express its views and will do so today, this is not a subject which they would want to go into in a great deal of detail today. SPA is, as you know, answering much more detailed questions which have been provided to SPA by the panel, and will engage further on that issue in due course. So with that preliminary remark, I hand over to Wayne Hook.
Okay, good morning, everybody. As Jean said, I'm a director of the SPA group. I'm an ex-CEO of the group, stood down because my wife was ill in 2014. I wasn't fired. I'm still a director of the company and look after some of our international investments and the Build It group. Unfortunately, the current CEO is overseas, but I've been in the group for around 30 years, so I pretty much know how it works. If there are any tricky questions, I've got a couple of my colleagues in the audience on the cheap seats there, so they'll help if I need it. What I'm going to do is just try and quickly, firstly, just to run through what I've got there on the slide. Firstly, the structure of the group, a little bit about store formats, the independent retailers and the role they play in the group, touch on lease exclusivity, a little bit about the way we buy within the SPAR group and how that all happens, house brands, community involvement, and then just some comments on trading right now and some of personal feelings about the competitive situation. The two independent retailers will follow me and then just talk about their own situation and give you some insight into the life of an independent retailer in the SPAR organization. The presentation has obviously been put together based on submissions, so we presume that the two questions that have been asked before, so we assume that they would be relevant and answer most of the questions. So they've been put together by our team. I'm going to try and make the most of that and try and follow the train of thought that they've gone to in putting it all together. So let me get cracking and go through the presentation. This doesn't really come out very well on the overhead here, but if I can just sort of explain how the SPAR group works, and starting on the left, well, really not good there, but on the left, SPAR International is effectively an organization based in Amsterdam. SPAR is in 46 countries around the world. We in South Africa are one of those countries, and effectively what SPAR is charged with, SPAR International, it's a non-profit organization effectively owned by the members of SPAR. SPAR International has no financial interest in the various countries. Its job is really just to grow the brand internationally, spread the brand as it can, provide a forum whereby functional information is shared amongst that family so that we all learn from one another. And then they have a small buying office which primarily operates in Europe, because the countries are close together. Some of them are small countries, and so it makes sense that they do some sort of, let's say, particularly when you're dealing with SPAR brands, with your own house brands, that you don't try and develop those in each of the countries. We do not buy a huge amount from that organization, primarily because of the transport costs are prohibitive. So, and we are big enough here within the South African market to organize ourselves when it comes to SPAR brands. I'll touch on that a little bit later. So SPAR International grant us a license to operate in a region, and in our region it is South Africa, it's Swaziland, it's Botswana and Namibia, all our surrounding countries. We also have the rights to Mozambique, where we have some stores. Angola, we don't have any stores yet. And recently we have acquired SPAR in Zambia on a 50-50 JV. So we're involved in Zambia as well. So really the SPAR organization, as I say, operates under license from SPAR International. We got granted that license since 1963, so 54 years ago. And the SPAR group has grown from a small base to where we are today, and we'll talk about some of those things just now. So if I just try and refer to my, I can't point for you down there, so I'm going to have to just point here. So effectively, SPAR International there, the SPAR group is a listed company, and we effectively are the wholesaler and distributor. And we have distribution centers around the country, 6 distributions spread. Why do we have 6? Purely for logistics reasons. Obviously the size of our country determines that we need to do that, and we find that to be the most efficient way of doing so. We have a guild, if I can point to the top section here, the SPAR Guild of South Africa, and effectively that SPAR Guild, because we are independent retailers and a wholesaler, we have what we call a guild, of which the wholesaler and the retailers are members of that guild. And that guild is responsible for leading SPAR together. And why do we have it? We have it purely because we're a wholesaler, we have independent retailers, and together we need to decide how we take this group forward, as opposed to us saying, as the wholesaler, we have the license, boys, jump on this bandwagon if you like it or not. We find that by collaborating with our retailers, we get a better solution, and it's the way SPAR works internationally as well. So we have copied the formula that works internationally. So effectively, that guild there is a non-profit organization. The retailers operate for their own they have their own financial interest in their own business, and the SPAR group in our own business. So we have two separate financial entities or groups of entities, and we work together just to lead, to drive, and to promote the brand SPAR. So that's what the guild is all about. What also things that would fall under the guild would be things like promotions. What are we going to promote? So the retailers would give input in a marketing committee together with the wholesalers. They'd have a discussion. We'd agree what products we're going to promote in order to be successful in the market. So there's a lot of collaboration, and it all happens through this non-profit entity. Funds flow into it. Retailers pay advertising contributions into that fund, separately financially managed, and that is responsible for driving the promotions, etc., of the organization, as well as growing the brand SPAR. So if we were to grant a membership, someone applies to join the SPAR family, that body, the SPAR guild, would decide whether we do that, not the SPAR group. We would have input, the retailers would have input, and that body would decide. Why do we do it that way? Purely because we want retail input into matters of retail interest. Remember that we are effectively a club of retailers, and it would be silly of us to just willy-nilly. From our point of view as a wholesaler, we would love more and more members, but if we didn't have a system of regulating that properly, we could open stores everywhere on top of existing members. They wouldn't want to belong to this club if that happened. As it is, there are always issues and discussions with regard to that, because we have to grow the SPAR brand responsibly, but there's input from both parties to determine whether we go ahead, whether we don't. That happens within each of the regions. So there's 6 regional guilds. If anybody is unhappy with that, the decision to grant a membership, they have a right of appeal to the national guild, where the thing will be looked at freshly. So just going back to the guild, effectively you've got SPAR retail stores here, and those retail stores become members of this guild. On our side, from the wholesale side, and I'm talking about from the SPAR group point of view here, we have distribution centers who supply them goods, and we are also members of that guild. So that's how that happens. The brands that fall under that, we have a number of brands. The brands that fall under the SPAR guild are all the SPAR brands, so Super SPAR, SPAR, Quick SPAR, Tops. Tops is our liquor brand, because in this country you can't have liquor. You can have wine in the supermarkets, but you may not have the rest. So we've had to create a separate brand for our liquor stores called Tops. We have pharmacy at SPAR. It's a small, it's a new initiative, so that sits under the SPAR guild for convenience reasons. One day, once there's sufficient, they probably will have their own guild, because it's a separate business, as separate and distinct from the food business. And then Save More, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but it's a small food store. So that all sits under there. Build It it operates on a similar system, but we have a separate guild for Build It because it's come of age. There's about 350 stores, a completely different business, building materials, and really nothing to do with SPAR. So we have created a separate guild, because otherwise we'd have a lot of discussion about things that have no relevance to one another. So that's the reason for having a separate Build It guild, but it operates the same way. Build It retail members but belong to that guild, and ourselves as a SPAR group are also members of that guild. So hopefully that clarifies how we operate. Just running down the right-hand side, so the SPAR group is effectively a wholesaler and distributor of groceries. It says there, we do groceries, personal care items, general merchandise, chilled, fresh produce, meat, etc., etc. A whole range of supermarket goods through our 6 distribution centers. The distribution centres, there's one per region: KZN, North Rand, South Rand, Lowveld, Eastern Cape and Western Cape. I'll touch on those just now. Another point here was just to emphasize that we are largely an independent retailer organisation. 98% of our stores are owned by independent retailers. We believe firmly in that model, that we say independent retailers who've got their livelihoods on the line. You will hear from some of them later, and it's not all a bed of roses, that they will do a better job than just managers in a store. So, you know, we believe very strongly in the independent retail model, and so we are different from the chains in that regard. 98% of our stores are independent retailers. Why do we own any stores? Well, predominant reason for that is if we have a store that gets into trouble, and how and we don't have a retailer, an independent retailer at that point in time to purchase a store, but it's a strategic site for us. We don't want to lose it to the SPAR Group. We would then put that. I don't think I've got my mic on, have I? No. But are you hearing me anyway? Okay, good. I'll turn that off, otherwise it's just going to whistle at me. All right, so 98% independent stores. We would only own stores if we really had to. So we were trying to protect a strategic site. We would obviously own that store. In most cases, we've done that over the 50 years, and as time has gone on, independent retailers have expressed an interest in buying those stores, and we've sold them off. What tends to happen is sometimes the stores are maybe not financially viable in the short term, and we build them up until they are, and then an independent retailer willingly will take them over from us. So it's really to protect existing sites. Also, it provides us with an opportunity to test concepts in our own stores, new concepts and new ideas. So it provides a role for us in that respect. The last point: independent retailers trade under the SPAR brand, and we call our trading system a voluntary trading group system, let's say. So effectively what happens is the retailers join us voluntarily. They can leave us voluntarily. They have to give us 30 days notice, and they can leave us. We do have a situation where we do have a 3-year initial period where they may not leave us. One of the reasons for that is we obviously invest a lot of time, money and effort in getting the stores going, and we feel that we want to have the opportunity to sell to them during that period to recover some of those costs. But after that, it's a formalized handshake. They can leave at 30 days notice. And from a buying point of view, it's also a voluntary situation. Obviously, we are onto the retailers, trying to get them to buy more from us on a day-to-day basis, but they are not obliged to buy from us. So very much we believe we need to earn their loyalty, as opposed to saying we've got a franchise agreement that says you must. But we do put pressure on the retailers to buy from us, because obviously otherwise our business is not going to survive. But it's got to make sense for them in the end. So effectively, we say we are different from a franchise system, which has a 500-page agreement. You will. Ours is a 3 or 4-page agreement, which says these are the way the system works. The bottom line is that our retailers are independent retailers. They trade at their own financial risk. If they don't make it, they lose the money, not the SPAR Group. So effectively, we believe that we are the little guys operating under a single brand with a support system that ensures the likelihood of success is greater than a little guy on his own trying to make it. So it tries to deal with the independent situation and give them support to allow them to be successful against the chains. That's why SPAR was born in the Netherlands in 1932. The same thing happened. The chain started to grow. The wholesaler worked together with the independent retailers in order to try and be able to survive against the bigger guys. So we provide a service on goods. We provide advertising and promotions for the retailers, IT systems, retail operations support to try and help them from a retail operations side, store design, a whole lot of support services to allow them to have more chance of being successful against the big guys. Okay, enough on that. Let me move on to some of our formats. This is really, and I really will just stick to the food side of it, seeing that's what we focused on. I'm not going to start talking about Build It and liquor and all that sort of thing. So I'm just sticking with the SPAR formats. We have effectively four formats, as you can see there. Super Spar are big stores, approximately, so this is an average of our 326 stores, about 1,700 square meters. So they can sort of trade head to head against the bigger, let's call them ShopRites, Checkers, Pick and Pay stores. Average turnovers are around 10 million rand a month. And what they do is, obviously, because they're bigger, they offer a bigger range of product and services. They are priced competitively, very competitively, and we will match effectively the big guys there. Otherwise, you can't compete in that market. And we have Super Spars in the town areas, but also in the emerging market areas, in the townships, out in the outlying areas, wherever we believe that the volume is such that we can justify putting a big store. Remember, it costs a lot of money to set up a store like this. Probably Rolf, 12 million to 15 million would be the price. We got guys who spend over 20 million on setting up a store like that, but we're talking about big money to set one of those stores up. So we've got to be sure that the guy's going to do the turnover. We don't always get it right. So the big stores there, the Spar stores are more, let's call them neighborhood stores, as we like to do, competitively priced. They will be within a couple of 2 to 3% of the big guys, but they won't be cent for cent with them because they're obviously doing less turnover. They can't afford to be at the same price when a store's doing 10 or 15 million or more. So they would be smaller stores. The minimum, I think, is 750 square meters. Rolf, where are you? 750, but the average size store is around 900. There's the turnover that they do, around 4.5 million. And we have about 345 Spar stores. So that's where most of our history was. The Super Spar came about 10 or so years ago. And then Quick Spar are smaller stores, so real, let's call them express shopping stores, smaller, 500 square meters, turnovers at about 3 million. We have about 125 of those. We even have another format here called Express, which has only got going in the course of the last year or so, and they predominantly forecourt stores, where we are getting going in the forecourt area. We'll all know that the forecourt stores are growing day by day, and all of the opposition are getting into that segment. And then Save More is really, again, a smaller format. It's not a Spar format directly, although we supply them. And really, we see it as a nursery for Spar. Smaller towns where we can't justify getting a retailer to spend the sort of money that I've talked about in developing, let's say, a full-blown Spar store, but a nursery to get into the group where we will support them, we will give them a supply of goods, hopefully one day seeing them grow into one of the other formats. So as you can see, smaller, and we only have about 27, or probably these days just over 30 of these stores out there. So that just gives you a feel for what's going on from a format point of view. If I move on to the next slide, this is really just showing you from a regional point of view how we operate, how we break ourselves down. So we have a management team in South Rand. That distribution center is about a 60,000 square meter distribution center, supporting 245 stores. We have a management in each of these regions. They're autonomously managed. Obviously, these guys all sit on an executive committee, but they manage that business as if it was their own, if I can call it that, autonomously with those retailers and what's right for that region. So that's a distribution center in Jet Park in Johannesburg. North Rand look after about 112 stores in South Africa. They also look after and support Botswana stores in Zambia, etc. So some of the Botswana, what else up there? Yeah, those are predominantly the areas. So they supply a couple of stores outside of the country through this distribution center. Geographically, it's best placed to do that. So that's in Clayville, sort of mid-Rand towards Pretoria area. The Western Cape, 136 stores they look after. They also look after Namibia, so there's a few more stores there. They're based in Cape Town. Eastern Cape, the distribution centers in PE, 111 stores there. Lowveld, that's in Nelspruit, and they also look after Mozambique, 200 kilometers away from Maputo, so the logistics work best from Lowveld. And then KZN is here based in Durban, 183 stores here. So the group is about 823 Spar stores. Okay, so let's forget liquor. There's about 650 of them, and Build It, another 350 of them. But let's just talk food side of our business. 823 in South Africa, and there's about another 60 or so, 65 stores in the surrounding countries that we support out of our South African operation. But seeing we're talking about South Africa, 823 is a relevant number here. Moving on. Our store formats, effectively the different formats has facilitated expansion into the whole of South Africa. So we're represented, probably the most widely represented of the groups, because we have a number of stores throughout the country, probably about 55, somewhere around that percent in the town areas or the metro areas, and so virtually half in the metro areas, and the balance in the township, peri-urban, rural areas. We're very strong, particularly in the outlying areas. So that gives you a sort of mix. We are not just a town-based or a metro-based organization. We have about 104 stores that are black-owned, as we term it. Previously disadvantaged people own those stores. You'll hear from some of the guys today. 95% of the SPAR stores, and when I call SPAR, we call SPAR as the brand, the overarching brand. When I say SPAR, I'm talking Super SPAR, SPAR, Quick SPAR, all of them. So 95% of the SPAR stores are in centers that are smaller than 15,000 square meters. So they might have 10 or 12 stores. We have very few stores. Probably Gateway is our only one where we have in a center that's 75,000 and above. But 95% of our stores are what we call in either standalone sites or in strip centers, where there might be, as I say, 10 or 15 stores. We are not focused. We are more focused on being convenient to the customer than being in the big bomber centers. So as you can see, there are 5% of our stores over 15,000 square meter. That's an estimate. I won't be far out. SPAR typically freestanding or small developments, as I've said. All right, let's get on to some of this stuff here, and I'll just try and pick up on the most important points here that my team have put in here. So basically the way we operate, independent retailers, we can't conduct our way in the same method that the national chains would use. Effectively, they are independent retailers, so we can't control the retail prices that they charge. What we do, however, have is a recommended retail price. And what we say to the retailers, we will do the research. You guys can't send people out in the market, understand what's going on, the competitive forces. You've got to be retailing. So let us understand what's going on in the market, and let us set a pricing, a guiding thing, come up with a suggested retail. And from that point of view, you guys continue and focus on selling, is what we want you to do. Look after the retailers. So effectively, they, however, have the right to change the prices, to sell whatever. We can't force them to do that, to sell it at our recommended prices, because it's their own business and they've got to make those businesses financially viable. So we give them a recommended price and we do not force them to sell at that price. SPAR stores may compete with each other. I mean, the point there is really just to say that it's not a perfect science determining which stores and how we break up the market. So there is overlap in markets, and there are stores that compete with each other. For us, the important thing is trying to, when we get an application for a new site, to try and determine what we think the impact is going to be. And you don't always get it 100% right. That's why we involve retailers with ourselves as a wholesaler, as I said before, in adjudicating the granting of those memberships. But SPAR stores are reasonably close to one another, certainly in the urban areas, and so to some extent their markets will overlap. What we do is we say to our guys, our job is to protect you. We're fighting the opposition. We're not fighting each other. So if there's a situation where, for example, we bring a new store into an area where we say we are not capturing the bulk of the market, we will protect their existing guys as much as possible. So by supporting them, helping them, giving them undertakings to make sure that they don't take a big hit if we were to open another store. So we have got to do what I said before, try and grow SPAR responsibly. Okay, carrying on with independent retailers. So there are three avenues for the independent retailers to purchase products. Firstly, through our distribution centers. So effectively, they will squirt an order into us electronically. We will pick it that night, and the truck will be on its way to them the next day, and they will get goods in the stores. On drop shipment, this is where there's already a distribution infrastructure in place. Take Coca-Cola, take the newspaper people, take the milk people, etc., etc. They already have distribution where they supply the whole market. They say they will continue doing that because they do that for the opposition stores. So we will do what we call drop shipment. So with those suppliers, we will negotiate a deal with them. Effectively, we undertake to take responsibility for the payment to those suppliers, and we charge the retailers. So we have the benefit of bulk buying, and the supplier has the benefit of being guaranteed a payment. And for that, we take a small commission for doing that. And the retailer will get a better price than if he had to do it on his own. That's why he would support the system. So we have 3 avenues: through the distribution center, on drop shipment, or direct. In other words, if the retailer has a supplier down the road of fresh produce, we would encourage him to support that supplier of fresh produce down the road, because we believe in supporting our retailers, supporting those who are going to support him. I mean, we obviously have to work. We are part of the community. We need to support the community where we can. So there are direct suppliers, and there are other suppliers out there hawking business and looking for. It's one of our strengths, and that our retailers have that flexibility. It's a weakness for us as a wholesaler, because guys can snipe at our businesses, and what do? They pick on the big guys who've got buying power and all the rest of it. So, but be that as it may, it's the way our system works, is a voluntary trading system, so we abide by that. We, on the other hand, are a wholesaler, but we only supply our retailers. And the reason that we do that is we say our success is inextricably linked. We dedicate ourselves to you, and that makes sure that we need to make sure that our retailers are successful in order for our wholesale business to be successful. The last thing we want to be doing is, here's a Spar store, there's another store next to it, and we're supplying goods to them. That's not going to be very good for a guy who wants to belong. They belong to this club because they're the only guys who can get it. We only supply Spar stores as opposed to just being a general wholesaler. Okay, let's move on. Independent may support local suppliers. I've covered that. So on average, 80% of their goods come through the Spar system. So either through the distribution centers or drop shipment, which we say is through the system, and the balance of it, 20%, which a value is about 15 billion in value. We do about 75 billion in South Africa. When I say we, our retailers do about 75 billion in turnover at retail, and about 20% of that they buy not from ourselves as the primary wholesaler. So that just gives you a feel for what is bought outside of our system and from independent suppliers, direct suppliers. So we effectively have to compete with other wholesalers, etc., etc. A Spar store is typically owned by an individual, and as I say, you'll hear from some of them today, or a small number of individuals. So sometimes you have a partnership of 2 or 3 guys who own a store or a couple of stores. Just to give you a feel, out of the 823 stores, I think we've got about 500 retailers. So you can see that I mean, our biggest number of stores is about, that one retailer will own is probably 24 or 5, Rolf, something like that.
Botswana.
Yeah, in Botswana, and he's got a couple of stores in Namibia. But by far and away, the guys will either own 1 store or 2 or 3 stores, okay? You'll hear from some guys who own a couple more today. But by and large, it's owned by an individual, or, as I say, 2 individuals or so. Just in terms of properties and how that works, about 20% of the properties that the store is housed in and the guy operates from are owned by the independent retailers. I mean, in retailing, you would have heard it, I'm sure, over time. Certainly the Competition Commission people would have heard it. That there's always a niggle between landlords and retailers, and this is not our industry. It's across the board. I mean, effectively, everyone wants to try and make some money. That's the bottom line. So the retailers, if they can, would try and acquire their buildings. So 20% are owned by the retailers. Another fact, about 25% of the leases from the landlord are held by Spar, and we sublet them to the individual retailers. Why do we get involved in the process as the wholesaler? often it's a landlord requirement. Okay, so what will happen is that the landlord will come along to us and say, well, you guys want to come into the centre. My alternative is I put ShopRite or Pick n Pay, and they come with a blue chip with a corporate lease. You want me to sign with Joe Soap? No chance. So he says, I'd rather go with one of them. So we, as the SPAR Group, a listed company with a bit of financial clout, are therefore, that's how this thing started. So we got caught up in, we were reluctant to get involved in those leases in the initial stages, and we had to in order to secure those sites. I mean, obviously the benefit to ourselves is that once we sign that lease, we secure that site for the SPAR organization. But it was certainly not the initial situation that the landlords often need a blue chip lease to secure finance from the banks in order to do the development. So this thing rolls a couple of steps backwards. The balance, so 20, so let's say, so about 75% of the leases we are not involved in, they're held by the independent retailer. About 30% of the leases, I know exclusivity is an issue, about 30% of our leases contain an exclusivity provision. That's our estimate of it, because we don't have sight of every one of those independent retailers' leases. Some of them we have looked at, but we don't, I mean, the retailer is not obliged to show them to us, it's his business. And having looked at it, as this thing has become more of an issue, it's amazing that in some cases we have standalone stores with exclusivity clauses in their leases, where the guys have just taken a standard SPAR lease and tried to and just used it. So it's a crazy situation when you're only a SPAR store there and you have an exclusivity lease, exclusivity clause. But about 30% have exclusivity provisions in there. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Yeah, where there is exclusivity, it is to varying degrees. So in some cases you might have it prevents another supermarket coming in. In other cases it will be a supermarket plus a butcher, a bakery, and a fresh produce store coming into the business. And what are the reasons for extending that? Primarily because in the supermarket business, that's where you make some money, in our fresh and our service department. In groceries, more and more it's become more competitive. More and more products are sold on promotion where you don't make margin. So those service departments are crucial to the success of the independent retailer. So that's why some of the exclusivity clauses get extended. As I said, the figures are estimates because we don't have copies of all the leases, but I won't be too far out in the estimates there. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about exclusivity, and these are primarily the points that have been made in various submissions that have already taken place, and that Jean has covered why we don't want to get into detailed questions here, but for transparency, let me just cover what we can. So effectively, we've got the independent retailer, and I've said to you, their livelihoods are on the line. So they're making a bet based on, for example, a feasibility that's done. It's not a perfect science. It's a guesstimate of what turnover he's going to do and how much profit he thinks he can make and when he's going to make it. So for the retailer, there are obviously risks, and he's got significant investments to make. I think I will, just to give you a feel, as I said, super SPARs might be 12 to 15 million, SPAR store 10 million to set up, 8 to 10 million, Quick SPAR around 6 million. If my figures are not too far out of date, Rolf, I think that would be about the sort of number. So it's serious money that an individual's got to commit himself to. And the reason that he wants some sort of exclusivity is that he can only have a say in what happens in his centre. He can't have any say in where other people put other centres, and all of us are aware of what happens in the market. Centre opens across the road. If this one's a successful one, centre opens across the road behind, and in most cases you will see a SPAR store with a ShopRite nearby, or a Boxer, or a Pick n Pay, or a Woolworths. We trade very close to one another as it is. So we are having a say in this centre, but we can't have any rights of blocking centres that operate around us, and that's just the way it is. Some cases have come around where a landlord has tried to get clever and try to build another centre right alongside his existing one, but that's a subject of another discussion. So for the most important point is that the retailer is at risk, and what if he could not have exclusivity in this centre, let's say, as I said, most of them are 15,000 square metre centres. He's probably taking 3,000 square metres. If we're going to put another store in the same centre as him, he's going to say, count me out, I don't want to be a part of that. I'm going to halve my turnover overnight. I mean, I can't control what happens across the road, but if I'm going in and I can't even have a say about what goes on here, the chances of me surviving are negligible. I'm not in. I'll put my money in the bank rather. So it's as simple as that. So we are very different to the chains in that we've got independent retailers in those businesses who can't afford to take 4 and 5 years for a store to become profitable. They've got to become profitable pretty quickly, otherwise they've gone and forgotten. So, you know, they don't have the same financial resources as the chains, and so their time span to become profitable is so much shorter. I mean, for most of the guys, if they're not making money in 6 months, or if they're not getting to a break-even point, they're under pressure. In some cases, we have guys who've got a couple of stores, so he might have a little bit more leeway, but it really is a situation within an independent environment. And as you can see here, the retailers have to pay the rent regardless of the success of the store. He's made a commitment, he's got to pay. The lease agreements, personal suretyships, they have performance clauses. So the performance clause meaning doesn't matter if you're losing money in that store, you have got to pay your rent. It doesn't, you know, it's not a case of, well, if you're not making, I mean, of course, if the store is not successful, we'll try and talk to the landlord, but landlords are not very open to negotiation. They've also made commitments and built a centre, and so they've got payments to make to banks and that sort of thing. So performance clauses for independent retailers are tough. They can't just walk away from it, and they can't actually just change the nature of their business. The supermarket's not working, so I'll try and put something else in it, or I'll sublet it to somebody else. It doesn't work like that. The landlord has restricted their use. He wants a supermarket in that centre because he needs an anchor tenant. So he doesn't want us to put something else in there. And so, you know, there are restrictions to what a guy can do where the situation doesn't work out. And effectively, the exclusivity is to protect the investment that he's made in the store. As I described earlier, he can't control anything that happens around him, only could potentially have a say. And some landlords say no exclusivity in this centre. Most of them, because we're in small centres, say, I'm not giving up anything. Logic prevails. And if I'm going to put a 3,000 square metre site, remembering that we need 3,000 square metres with the backup areas and all the rest of it, if I'm putting a 3,000 square metre to put another store in a small centre, I'm going to cause trouble for myself. The guys are not going to be able to pay at some point in time. Time period for a retailer to break even varies wildly. I mean, we'll have some situations, Dan will talk about where it's gone on for 5, 6 years and more, where we still haven't managed to break even in stores. Other guys are lucky that in 3 or 4 months they do break even because it just happens to be the right location. So it's very difficult to sort of say that after 3 years a guy our independent retailer will break even, or 1 year, or whatever, because it varies wildly and widely between the different situations. The other thing is that when it comes to exclusivity, retailers have got to continually reinvest. So it's even if after 3 years he breaks even, let's say, for example, now he starts making in years 4 and 5. At the end of year 5, he's got to reinvest in that business. If he doesn't, he's going to be a tired old store, and the competition around him are going to show him up. So we would be saying to our independent retailers, you have got to revamp your stores every 5 years. If you don't do that and upgrade your stores, your turnover is just going to go like that. And my members on the left of me will affirm that later. But it is a situation where you don't invest once and then for 15 years you sit back on and reap the benefits of it. You've got to continually reinvest because new stores are coming up around you all the time. You've got to be with it. You've got to be continually innovating, putting new concepts in there. Otherwise, your business will slide. So, I mean, and when I talk about reinvesting in a store, if it costs 10 million to set up, after 5 years, the guy will be spending another 5 million probably to upgrade that store. It's telephone numbers. We're not talking about, 500,000 upgrade. So for us, you know, I know there's been discussion about determining what an acceptable period of exclusivity. It's very difficult to come up with a fixed number and say, you know, after 3 years or 5 years, that, I mean, it doesn't work. In our situation, if we had to say, you got as an independent retailer, you've got 3 years exclusivity. After that, it's open season. We will not have independent retailers going into retail stores. We will just open it up for the chains. The chains can maybe take that sort of hit. Independent retailers can't. It's just as simple as that. Let's move on to buying. I'm sure we'll have some questions on that particular topic. Procurement within SPAR, I'm just talking about buying. The way we work is that SPAR would negotiate. We deal with national suppliers and regional suppliers, and as I say, our retailers deal with their own suppliers, direct suppliers. So there's a whole range of different supplier arrangements and ways of getting stock into our stores. Where we're talking the big suppliers, so we're talking the Nestlé's, the Unilevers, the big multinationals who are a crucial part of the supermarket industry, and you've got to have their products in your stores, otherwise, because the consumer wants them. It's as simple as that. So with the big guys, we have national trading terms with those national suppliers. That would determine the overall trading arrangements with those stores. And then, as I say at the end of that sentence, within each of the distribution centers, so in the regions, they would then negotiate trading terms with regional suppliers. So you might have a milk producer in KZN who just supplies KZN stores, and therefore the KZN DC would negotiate some trading terms for that regional supplier. So some is done on a national basis. Why do we do it on a national basis? Because we have the bulk buying power in order to try and, I mean, we're dealing with multinationals that gets the power balance right from our point of view. So we would look at that. The national, the regional guys with the regional suppliers. And then what we would do within each of the DCs, when they place an order, they would then have a discussion with the supplier and say, okay, if I buy 100 cases, what's the order? If I buy 500 cases, what's the price? And they will use the volumes in each of those regions to try and get a better deal, because that's what we have to do. That's what we are trading against. So each of the distribution centers would then negotiate a price and try and get a better price based on a commitment that they're giving in terms of volume, in terms of et cetera, all sorts of whatever it might mean that at that point in time that was important. SPAR does not have exclusive arrangements with suppliers, including relating to SPAR branded products. In other words, a supplier is free to produce and pack product for all parties. We do not say, if you supply to SPAR, you may not supply the opposition. No agreements do we have where we have those arrangements in place. So I think that's important to note. Obviously, where we ask a supplier to pack a SPAR brand for us, they can't supply that SPAR brand to Pick n Pay, to the opposition, to independent retailers. That would be crazy, putting a SPAR brand in a non-SPAR store. So the supplier, no exclusive arrangements with them. In other words, if he packs a SPAR brand, he can pack a Pick n Pay brand, a Metro brand, whatever brand he likes. We don't restrict him from that point of view, but we will not supply that SPAR brand to anybody else, and we will not allow him to provide that SPAR brand to anybody else as well. He can't sell it to them. He can only sell it to us for obvious reasons. SPAR predominantly procures product from South African suppliers or companies who operate in South Africa. Less than 5% of our goods, and I would guess that it's probably a couple of percent at the most, are imported products. We might have some fancy Italian ranges that get imported. Most of them, to be honest, are produced in our own country, but some of it would come in, but 95% of the product is from South African suppliers and manufacturers. And then obviously the SPAR group attempts to get the best possible prices in order that we can pass on those benefits to our retailers to compete with the rest of the market. That's what we have to do. As I said in the beginning, our job is to put our independent retailers in a position to compete with the bigger guys out there. Let me move on to SPAR house brands. What do we do when we're looking for? So house brands would be SPAR brands or Save More brands, and effectively 99% of it would be, or 95% of it would be SPAR brands. We would tend to look for secondary suppliers and not go to the big guys. Why do we do that? Because we don't want to be in the hands of a Unilever or a Nestle. If there's a shortage of supply, he's going to obviously sort himself out first before, and I'm going to be the guy who goes out of stock of my house brands. We would rather have a smaller guy his livelihood depends on the success of the SPAR brand that he's packing for us, so that he treats us in the way we need to be treated, and we make sure that we are in stock of that product better than we would otherwise be. SPAR has over 150 suppliers supplying house brands, and then we would assist those suppliers to develop the product, the packaging. So we would tell them what specs we want, what we want the product to look like. We would supply recycled cardboard and plastic to him to enable him to have a more cost-effective way of packaging the product, because that would land the product in our stores cheaper. So we find all sorts of ways of working with those suppliers to make sure that supply chain is efficient. I'm getting to the end. Community involvement. As I said before, it's an imperative of SPAR and the way the SPAR organization works that our stores are part of the community in which they trade. And we want to obviously try and help and see what we can do to help develop those communities. So we get involved in the causes. We can't help everyone. Obviously, there's such a huge need in our communities these days. We can't help everybody, but what we do is encourage our stores to be involved in the community and support those people who help us, because who support us, because if they see that we are supporting good causes in their community, logically they're going to want to shop and support the guys who do that, the SPAR store who supports them. So that's central to the ethos of the SPAR model. We're very much involved in the local community, whether it's a school, the community care centers, feeding programs, growing programs, etc., etc. The next one was just a rural hub concept, and this is really just as an example, or one of the things that we are doing is setting up a JV between emerging. This has been tried. We're not the first guy to try this, but we think that we're going to have some success here, because what we're trying to do is set up a joint venture with emerging farmers in the Guyani area. I'm right, Kevin, and we've got a couple of other hubs planned, but it's the first one we're doing. Emerging farmers with the retailers in the area. You've got to have the retailers support, because they've got to commit to taking the product off the emerging farmers, and the SPAR group involved with some funding. We've got to set up so we're talking about fresh produce areas predominantly. We're going to have a pack house, which we've obviously put money into, and the idea is a tripartite JV where everybody has an interest in this business, because we want at some point in time for this thing to be self-sustaining. So we will invest product. We've got funding from various bodies, including the Dutch government, etc., etc. Our own government, I think, have been involved in supporting the project, and a number of other organizations, in order to try and make this thing successful. But the idea is to pilot the thing. We've got a number of other projects planned and rolled out, and we've given commitments, particularly when you get funding from overseas. You've got to make these sort of commitments. So we have got Kevin, as an example, who looks after sustainability in our group, and he's very involved in getting out there. We employ people like TechnoServe to help us to train the farmers to try and make sure that this thing is going to be a success. So we are 100% committed, put money behind it, and most importantly, the money is one thing. The most important thing when you do something like this is the time and the time that you're involved in them. The money and just giving money, the thing is fought to fail. You've got to give your time and effort in managing this business and in managing these different relationships. So that's just an example. Where the local retailers would be sourcing produce from the farmers, and that we would allow those farmers to grow from being subsistence farmers to hopefully being commercial farmers. Just the last comment from my side is really just a couple of general comments so that we don't finish there. Just on the trading side, retailing, I mean, I think everybody knows about it, is really tough at the moment. The consumer's under pressure. We all know what's happening. Political uncertainty, food inflation, with the rand having come under pressure. Volumes our volumes are down on a year ago. So it's a tough situation. We're having more product being purchased on promotion, and we know on promotion we don't make the same margin, and everybody scrapping more for market share. So I talk about competitive forces. That's really where it is. There's a full-on scrap between everybody out there to try and get more than their fair share of the market. That's really what it's all about. And we have got players. We've got the big guys. We've got newcomers into the market. Some of them are big guys, new into food. We've got new players that have come through from Botswana into our market. We've got forecourt stores that are growing. We've got small players, particularly foreign traders coming into our market, some of them which don't follow the rules. So the competitive forces are coming from all sides, and it's not an easy place to be in. I can assure you that none of these situations is there any collaboration that takes place between any of the players in the market. I'll put my hand on the Bible to that. I was a chief executive for 7 years and never met with any of the chief executives of any of those companies over that time. I met one or two of them in a social event, and that was it. SPAR Systems supporting independent retailers. Just to finish off on that, our success as the wholesaler with our independent retailers are inextricably linked. We've got to work with each other in order for both businesses to work. And as I said earlier, we on the wholesale side only supply our stores, nobody else. So we need these guys to be successful. Otherwise, we can close our 6 distribution centers and go home. I've said enough. I'm going to hand over to Nizzy. You're going to go next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nizibona Nkwelo, short for Nizzy, so everybody in the panel can just know me as Nizzy. Basically, I'm here to basically tell the story of our journey in retail and basically why we joined SPAR, and just give you a background on our business, and to basically end on some comments in terms of how we're trading and the kind of market we sit in. I'm basically from the Transkei, in the Mthatha area. So if all of those that know Mthatha, we come from that part of the world. We are SPAR retailers. We buy our stock, or procure our stock from the KZN DC here at Phoenix. I currently sit in the Regional Guild Committee at the current moment. We basically started, well, when I say we, our family, that means my mom and dad, who are currently heavily involved in the business still. Myself and my sister, at the time, my parents started the business in 1986 as a small independent retailers in the Transkei in a town called Tsolo, which is about 40 kilometers away from Mthatha, and obviously Mthatha being the biggest town in the area. 1986, and obviously they grew the business, acquired a property next door, and built about a 500 square meter store, which was the biggest store in town, and away we went. In about 2007, Boxer was knocking in town, and we realized that days of sole independent retail as what we traditionally knew in terms of, when I talk about sole independent, without being part of a bigger network of retailers, was ultimately coming to an end. We needed to come to Big Brother and partner and be part of a bigger system of procurement so that we can be competitive with the likes of a Boxer that was coming into town. And subsequently in 2007, my dad basically liquidated all his pensions, put the house down, and put 10 million rand towards the SPAR store, and off and away we were in 2007. We subsequently built that, and in 2012 we paid off that store, and and an offer came in 2013 to buy an existing store 50 kilometers away from us in a town called Maclear. It was an existing Spar store owned by an existing Spar owner. We took over that store in 2013, and in 2014 another opportunity came up to buy a store that was under liquidation in a big catchment area in Lusikisiki, and we obviously couldn't forfeit the opportunity, and obviously took over that opportunity. The reason why we decided to join SPAR obviously is because traditional so-called rural areas evidently became sought after areas for your so-called big chains, and us as independents obviously wouldn't really survive. The story behind where we come from in Tholo is that our customers were obviously traveling 40 kilometers by taxi to a bigger center like Umtata, doing their groceries and basically using us as their basic spaza store, so to say. So we were not really getting the bulk of the purchasing, but so with the Boxer coming into town, obviously they would capture the majority. They would basically capture the leakage that was happening, and ultimately, that will be us, and that will be us out of retail. Currently, right now, in the 3 stores, we currently employ approximately 110 to 115 staff members in each store. Before we converted into our first SPAR store in Tholo, we had about approximately 60 staff members. Obviously, because of the volume of trade and the increase in operational expenses, and the need to basically have people ready, available to provide a SPAR service to your customers, you obviously need more people. We need to also understand that although we were trading small butcheries and small delis as independents, the requirement is that, if you're gonna compete against a ShopRite, if you're gonna compete against a Boxer, you need to go industry standard. So obviously we'd have to employ more people for the areas, for those services areas. So our staff complement ultimately moved from 60 staff members per store to about 110, 115 staff members per store. What I will also attempt to do to the Commission is just to give a breakdown in terms of how each store basically trades. We just need to bring light to the fact that each store trades in a very different market. Each store trades in a different trading environment. So just to give you guys a background in each store, Tholo store being the biggest store, obviously with Boxer being the major competitor in terms of chain stores, we have we've had since I could say post 1994, a big emergence of what we call independent traders as we know it today. That means your Chinese, Pakistanis, Somalians, Eritreans, those have been the biggest growth in terms of independent trade as what we know it today. These guys obviously trade in about what I would call 110, 200 square meter stores, largely commodity based. They provide a convenience to the customer in the sense that they don't have to go, customers don't necessarily have to go to our stores where, you'll have to go into long queues and more bigger customer pool in one area. They can go into these small little spaza stores or small little cafes, buy their bulk commodity products. What I mean by bulk is big bulk maize, bulk sugar, and basically get into the taxi and go home. That has basically become, that is in that particular town, that has ultimately become our biggest so-called threat from a market perspective. I can also attest to the fact that we weren't the only black retailers in town prior to us joining SPAR. There were other black retailers like us, but subsequently, retail is a lot of work. Retail needs a lot of effort. You put a lot of your time and investment in it, and subsequently, I think some people seeked greener pastures and went into procuring for government in government tenders and construction and other more lucrative businesses that would probably yield better return for them. Our Lusikisiki business, on the other hand, is a little bit. It's probably our biggest catchment area from a market perspective. We've got about 200,000 customers coming through that store per month. However, we're trading on 800 square meters. We've got in that town 2 ShopRites, 2 Boxers, a Rhino, a Checkout, and a multitude of independents. And when I mean independents, I'm talking about what I described as independents earlier on. In that town also, we are the only black retailer in town, which is, I mean, traditionally South African black retailer in town, and I believe without the support that we currently get from the SPAR system and the pool of independent retailers that we have at our disposal, we probably wouldn't be where we are. We currently get business from Flagstaff, parts of Port St. John's, and also parts of the Tabankulu area. That's how big that market is. Maclear is very different from the other two, in the sense that it deals with the wider LSM customer, which I mean is we deal with your traditional pension business, but we also have a lot of farmers' wives and a lot of farming, I mean, quite a big farming community there. So our offering needs to be very balanced across all sectors, and I mean that in my opinion is probably our most profitable business in the group. Just to add a bit of light in terms of how our business is structured from a pricing perspective. Obviously, SPAR obviously gives us what we call suggested RSPs, which is suggested retail selling prices, according to what Wayne alluded earlier on, according to what they believe we should be selling coffee at today. But because our different stores are geographically located differently, we have to basically play the market for what it is. For example, in Lusikisiki, you're dealing with 2 Boxers, 2 ShopRites, a Rhino, a Checkout, and a lot of independents. Our pricing will be a little bit different to how we would price our Maclear store, for example. So I mean, a lot of how we structure our pricing in our stores is highly dependent in terms of how we trade, how we feel we should trade that particular market. I believe if that system was not in place and it was a simple, tick the boxes, and this is the current trading system that you're working in, we probably wouldn't survive. And that entrepreneurial flair and that ability to actually drive your competence in the market as an independent retailer will probably be non-existent. We currently procure a lot of our produce from local produce suppliers, purely because of the fact that our Maclear store, for example, that do a lot of potatoes for us, that do a lot of cabbage, spinach, and all those bare necessities for your day-to-day produce requirements. Likewise, in the other 2 stores, if a guy has got, let's say, 100 hectares and he feels he can supply SPAR store with some cabbage now and then every 2 weeks or so, we are more than willing to give that guy business, because he ultimately feeds his family, and that customer ultimately stays loyal to our business, and the overall effect of how our competence in the market from a SPAR perspective and from our involvement in the community is that much better. We also we took it upon ourselves to get involved a lot in the communities, because you must understand, with my sister, my mom, my dad being in the business, we have to be in those stores almost every day, every day. So community involvement ultimately becomes incredibly important. So I think it was 1992, my dad wanted to realize that the scourge of crime was increasing quite drastically in the area, and we then ultimately decided to put money away it's about 100,000 rand a year, and we run a local football league together with South African Football Association and the municipalities, and just to get the kids out of the street, and ultimately doing something now and then. We sponsor schools, netball tournaments, and extramural activities that guys do. Like, for example, in Maclear, it's a big fishing destination for guys that are coming from the KZN down that side. So we do the local fishing tournament. There's a big bike trail that moves from East London to Berkeley East. We sponsor that. The local bull auctions that happen there with the farmers, we get involved in the catering side of that. So we try and do a lot of community involvement, and all of that. SPAR, from a corporate perspective, I mean, does not get involved at all in that aspect. Just in closing, I just want to basically give a background in terms of where I feel some of the major challenges are from an independent retailer's perspective in the markets in which we trade. We need to. I feel from my part is that the growth in what I've described, independent retailers, has ultimately become one of our major problems to deal with from a competence perspective. There's the two-sided story to this. I feel that those independent retailers are more than welcome to trade in the economies that we trade. Because obviously, one, they get us out. They make us more competitive. They allow us to be on our toes every single day, to understand that markets are changing on a day-to-day basis. However, I just think the biggest Achilles heel is making sure that we regulate the so-called independent trade. I mean, if a Pakistani guy comes into South Africa and decides to put up a trading store, we need to be able to vet those guys and see whether or not are you here legally, are you paying UIF, are you paying sectorial determination prices on your labor costs, and so on, and are you procuring the stock correctly like everybody else? And if more effort could be put in terms of regulating that side of the business, I think a lot of what I feel is detrimental to my business as an independent retailer who's been in the Transkei. Well, as a family as an independent family in the Transkei, has been in the Transkei for over 30-40 years. If that can be regulated a little bit better, I think our trading environment and the growth of all that want to trade in the areas that we're in can actually be better. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Maluleke. From Gauteng. I'm an independent retailer in Gauteng. I'm going to tell you my story of how I became a retailer. Actually, the business that I'm going to talk about here was founded by my father in the early 1960s in a place called Valmanstal, where I was born. Valmanstal, for those of you who would not know where it is in the map, it's a village 36 kilometers northeast of Pretoria. So I was born in that village, and my dad had actually bought a small farm there after he got injured in an accident, and which paralyzed his left leg, and he could not work anymore. So he practiced what I would call subsistence farming in order to support his family out of that farm. As his harvest dwindled as a result of drought, he diversified into retail, and he built a small store which he initially rented out to somebody else. And when he negotiated higher rentals with that retailer, a retailer couldn't pay rent, he said, well, I'll take the store and run it myself. So he took the store and started to run the store. But unfortunately, he had not possessed skills to run a store. And he was a community man. He loved education. He loved the church. He loved many people. So he had thought he had a market, what I would have called a captive market in our own language today, of teachers, Christians that were with him in the church, etc., who were buying from his store. And the beauty about it is that every one of those customers had accounts in the store, but they were not paying their accounts. Because at the end of the month, when they get paid, they would go to what I would call a destination store down from us there, which was owned by an Indian. But when they know my money, and then they come and use him to do that. So every time a customer comes, he forgets where he wrote him in that book. So he'd open another book. So he had books like this that had got amounts owing of credit of his debtors who were owing him, but he did not know how to do that. Every time he would fail to pay his suppliers because the money was not coming in. So that was the thing. So I actually grew up in that environment. I was educated in Valmanstal Primary School, and then I proceeded to a boarding school in Louis Trichardt because my dad said I would be naughty if I was getting there. So I went to study in Valmanstal, in a high school called Lemana. And then from there, I proceeded to the University of the North, where I studied for a BCom degree and majored in accounting. And the most important exercise that I did for my dad while I was a student was to try and understand why he was not making money out of that retail. So I took all those books, I calculated all the monies that he was owed and found that the monies that he was owed was 3 times more than the stock that he was carrying in the store. And I said, you cannot run a business like that because you got to start by collecting the monies so that you are able to pay, and you got to limit credit. And I said, if I were you, I would never give credit to customers because I don't have the infrastructure to run that type of a business. So that is what actually happened. But in the interim, Valmanstal was expropriated in the early 70s, and its communities were resettled in a township called Soshanguve. That is where I grew up, in Soshanguve. So as part of the terms and conditions of the expropriation, everyone in Valmanstal who had a small business, he was promised a similar business, if it's possible, by the then government. So that is how my father qualified to have a store in Soshanguve. So the first store that you see there on top there, which is called Maluleke Spa, was actually a company registered as Maluleke Pty Limited, which later became a closed corporation for reasons which I would explain if I have time at the end of this. I came into the picture because at the time when we relocated to Soshanguve, I was still studying at that time. And then the businesses in township, in Soshanguve, were more formal than they were in Valmanstal. There was only one developer of businesses, and that was what we call today business partners. We used to call it Cooperation for Economic Development. They would obviously be able to locate the sites, decide who should do what in that, etc. So my father was one of those who qualified for a business, and he was going to be an anchor tenant in a small little shopping center, Valmanstal. I mean, in that shopping center. So when we arrived in Soshanguve, they were given a small house to trade in temporarily while that shopping center was being built. So when the shopping center was completed, my dad went to meet business partners, and they said to you, to capitalize that store, it would cost you 23,000 rands. And when we look at your age, we don't think you would qualify because you are already retiring. We would not want to take risks. So they asked him, do you have children? And he said, yes, I've got children. And I said, where are they? He said, my other child is a lawyer. So yeah, we need that one. And where is your other son? He's still studying at the University of the North, but he's completing. He said, yeah, you see if you can bring those 2 children of yours, and then you register a company, Pty Limited, and you give them the shares in that particular company so that you end up with a smaller share because we don't want to overburden you with a loan when you would not be able to pay us back. You see, because we're gonna lend you that 23,000 rands on the basis that we're lending it to the company, And that company would have shareholders, and the shareholders themselves would take the risk. So they would take the risk in accordance with their age, because the younger, we're going to load them with the risk. So your sons would take 30% each. And then you've got to, on top of that, you've got to look for somebody else who is either a family member and has got experience, because all of you don't have experience in running a supermarket. So you give him shares in that particular, because he's going to take the risk. So fortunately, we had a gentleman called Shibambu who was staying in a neighborhood township, who was already a successful retailer, and he had a Spar store, which was a Save More store trading in that. So we indicated we're going to bring him to the company, and then that's how the company, Maluleke Supermarket, was formed. I became its first managing director in 1976, if I remember very well. So I'm going to take you through the history of this store that spanned over 40 years of retail experience, with each one of that highlighting the most important incident in terms of how it came about. Maluleke Supermarket traded from a store that was 40 square meters as an anchor tenant of that shopping center, which was built by business partners. It was employing mainly family members. It has 12 staff members, a staff complement of 12. And when I came in, I became the managing director, so I had to manage that particular store. And I was managing family members. And any one of you who understand what management is all about, there are ethics in management. It is extremely difficult to manage your sister, because you don't forget that she's your sister at home. And when you try to address her, she becomes personal, in the sense that when you go home, they begrudge you, because they think you're up to other things which they don't want to talk about. It was extremely difficult, but I later on learned how to manage a situation like that, because to me that was very important. I felt I had to take these things seriously. We have traded out of that store. We paid 23,000 rands back to business partners, and in the process we grew. We extended the store 3 times until we could not extend any further, because we reached the boundary of the shopping center. And every time we did that, we went to borrow money from them and we paid it. So that helped us build a sound track record in terms of the stakeholder, who is business partners, in terms of financing. So in 1980, I won a prize of Businessman of the Year out of that little store, and the prize was to travel overseas for 4 weeks on a look and learn trip. I was extremely excited about that achievement, and this is something that was a highlight in my life, because it changed the way I perceived retailing. Because I thought retailing was one of those things which is done by uneducated people. And I thought I was extremely educated. I don't need to go and work in a retail store. And I know that my father and my brother fought very hard to convince me to change my program, because I actually wanted to be an accountant. And I thought as soon as I finish my studies at university, I'm going to go and do articles and become an accountant. But that never happened. And in the meantime, I also got a job from Liver Brothers. So I had 2 things. And part of that job was to send me on an exchange program overseas for 6 months. So to me, those 2 things were more exciting than to go and look after a small store that employed 12 family members who keep on stressing you all the time. So I felt I had a moral obligation not to offend my parents, and I decided that I'm going to manage that particular store. But when I got this prize, I felt I have arrived big time. I traveled overseas with a lot of managers from OK Bazaars, from Checkers, etc., some of who I befriended in that trip, because my graduation actually at Turfloop was supposed to have taken place in that period. So I decided to graduate in absentia because I liked that trip. So I went on that trip. And then they threw me a very big party. Someone was like a chancellor performing the ceremony of graduation in that particular day when I was graduating. So I will never forget those guys. So they really looked after me. So when I got back, I found that I have learned a lot about what I did not know, that somebody can make a living out of a retail business because of the stores that we visited in those countries where the trips were. You know, So I came back, and my brother came to collect me from the airport. Then he said, "What did you see?" I said, "I don't know. But I'm sure we can do something. But the store that we have is a very small store. Unfortunately, we cannot do those things. We need to build a bigger supermarket because I want to see a store that would have a butcher inside." There were no stores in the townships that day. And I said, I want to be the first person to have that store. But the challenges were there. One of the biggest challenges that we have was to get land. You know, as you know, prior to 1994, if a black man you did not own land, Soshangube was a trust land. The land belonged to the homeland of Putatswana, and the South African government was holding it in trust in order to accommodate those black people who were non-Tswanas. So the best you could get was a 99-year lease. So you don't have a leasehold, you don't have a title deed, so you cannot own the land as a result of that. So I was also helped by SPA, to be honest with you, because they had a gentleman called Peter Nell who came from Zimbabwe, and he was my ROM at the time. So when I shared this idea with him that I'd like to have a bigger store, and I don't have money, I don't have land, I don't know how to go about it, he said, "Look, don't worry, just identify a